Hello, everybody. My name is Ratnos. Today we have beta patch notes, a little bit of live stuff as well, and some beta M plus affix stuff. So, already mentioned in previous blue post in one of the videos a day or two ago, there is a new affix called Oblivion, which we knew would spawn orbs that could be intercepted by players to get Mastery and Leech. But it's 2% Mastery and 1% Leech for 20 seconds. One player gives the buff to the whole party, and if the orb hits the mobs, it instead takes 10% less damage per stack, which does stack, obviously, I guess. This is pretty cool. I think this is actually a really good way of doing this. I mean, giving the mobs damage reduction instead of making them murder you, I think is great. Obviously, it is gonna feel bad still if this happens, but at least it's not gonna kill you. At least it's not gonna be the end. And also, you can stop this pretty easily, right? So here's some footage from Yoda's stream of these. There, you can see these orbs coming in, and so you kind of need everybody to go around and grab them. And obviously, there's going to be some boss fights where it's maybe not realistic to get a full arc around the boss, but in those spots, it'll be like on the tank to get in front in the more dangerous area if there's some fire that needs to happen, and it happens pretty infrequently as well. So overall, I think really a cool affix idea, and it's really nice that it stacks this on your whole party as well. I think that's a big underrated part of this too. Like, I think this affix is just going to be really fun to play with, so really cool there. Voidbound as well. As mentioned previously, it's getting some changes. One unannounced change, though, from the previously announced change to it is that the crit chance is being increased from 20% to 30% that you get from killing the Void Emissary. So even more rewarding to kill these things. Also cool. All right, we have some live news. So I haven't covered all of the War Within pre-patch notes, but I do want to quickly cover some of the top fixes, which is basically they're nerfing BM Hunter, they're nerfing a little bit of, or changing something about serve, I don't know, change to Destro here, but most of this is issue-y stuff. Rather, the main thing that they're actually just straight up nerfing is some BM. But a lot of classes actually had quite a bit change. A lot of classes have had their set bonus changed to be the Season 1 set bonus because their Season 2 or 3 set bonus was wrapped into their class tree or talent tree somehow as well. So, I don't know, again, I just mostly wanted to highlight this in this video to highlight that I haven't been highlighting all of the other stuff that's happened with this pre-patch. Not something I'm likely to keep too close of track of what's good during pre-patch, anything like that. But it is worth noting that BM came out really strong, has taken a bit of a nerf here. I wouldn't be surprised if they did some more tuning during pre-patch. I also wouldn't be surprised if stuff was allowed to be OP during pre-patch with the expectation that it's not going to be like that in War Within, and it's a pretty low prio part of the game for Blizzard. It's also worth noting Tindril, Fireack, Sarkareth were all bugged on Mythic difficulty, at least, to be quite a bit harder than they should be. So if you're out there and you're raiding, I don't know if they fixed that yet, but those are quite a bit harder than they should be. Razageth, on the other hand, quite a bit easier than it's supposed to be, so that boss is maybe a good one to, if you're trying to decide which Awaken raid to go do, maybe Vault of the Incarnates is the one, because it is, it's unintentionally easy rather than unintentionally hard. But yeah, that is what's going on live right now. Moving to a look ahead in the War Within beta. So, this week's War Within beta notes are, I would say, today is the day that we have swapped from development, design, to tuning. Tuning is pretty much all that's happening in these notes. Now, there are some abilities that are getting more moderate or substantial changes, but it's mostly tuning. Tuning is the main thing here. Let me move my camera so that you guys can see better. I've kind of realized there's not really much happening over on this side of the screen. A lot happening over there, so try the right-hand camera for the remainder of this video. All right, so again, before we actually start reading through all of these as well, in previous beta patch notes videos, I've talked about how I won't look too much at just tuning adjustments because it is beta. Tuning is pretty wild. I don't have a good handle on all 39 specs and how they're tuned, plus all the hero talents and how they're tuned. And that's still largely true that I don't have a great handle on everything, but I do have some, now at this point, knowledge of the general trends. So I should be able to comment on whether or not I'm surprised to see certain ones getting nerfed or buffed some of the time. Some of these I won't have much context about, so I'll try and let you know as we have those happen. So first off, we have DK. Deathbringer is getting nerfed here more for Frost than for Blood, but it is getting nerfed for both. Reaper's Mark is getting nerfed by 30% for both, and then Exterminate is getting nerfed by 10% for Blood and 25% for Frost. This is something that I'm excited to start seeing, is spec-specific hero talent adjustments. I think that the more we see them turning these knobs, right, that doing something different for the two different specs of the hero talents, the better. Like, that's something that is going to need to happen to help make sure that it's ideally, every hero talent is viable for both specs, is something that, like, using these knobs is going to be important. Now, the thing is, you probably want this to be the last thing you do in the tuning process, right? You want to do everything else and then adjust the hero talents between the two specs, because it would be nice if things mostly functioned the same between the two, or were similar, where the power was in the hero talent tree. And so I think that this, I don't know, it's good to see this. It's good to see them starting to do this. There were obviously a lot of hero talent trees that kind of inherently had this, right? Like Spellslinger for Mage just does different stuff for Frost and Arcane, and like that's to be expected. And the numbers are like pretty wildly different on some of the damaging events in that hero talent tree. But starting to see these sorts of changes is a good sign as well. Again, the tuning in beta in general has been way all over the place, and it is now War Within will be out in a month, right? So this they've gotta start reining in the outliers. All right, up next we have Rider of the Apocalypse, which is the hero talent tree for Frost and Unholy. This one is taking a nerf just to Trollbane's Icy Fury. Then Sand Lane, Vampiric Strike is now going to scale with Unholy Assault and other similar effects, which is an attack speed effect. Actually, Unholy Assault, I don't remember. I thought that was an attack speed thing for Unholy. Maybe it also comes with Damn, or maybe it used to be attack speed. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Who's to say? Visceral strength gain has been increased to 6%, was 5, and each stack of Frenzied Bloodthirst Essence of the Blood Queen increases your Death Strike and Death Coil damage by 3%, was 2. So Sand Lane's getting buffed, Rider and Deathbringer are getting nerfed, Frost is getting nerfed by 5%, and Unholy is getting nerfed. All abilities by 10%, but Clawing Shadows is getting buffed as well. These specs were already pretty good, although they did also take some nerfs recently, so they're getting more nerfs, and especially when you consider that the hero talent trees, both the Frost ones are getting nerfed, one of the Unholy ones is getting nerfed as well, and one of the Unholy ones is getting buffed. Okay, DH. We have some changes here to Felscard, which is good. This hero talent tree was dramatically underperforming Aldrachi Reaver, and I would argue it's more fun, not by virtue of being fun, but by virtue of not being actively anti-fun, which is what Aldrachi is to me. So Demon Surge damage is being increased by 80%, Burning Blades dot 50%, Enduring Torment now grants 10% increased damage and 5% haste, 10% damage to Chaos Strike and Blade Dance. So that's doubling that and almost doubling the haste. Student of Suffering bonus mastery effect increased by 50%, Flamebound 40% increased crit damage instead of 30, and Monster Rising now gives you 8% agi outside of demon form, was 5. Plus for Havoc, all non-hero talent ability damage increased by 13%. So hopefully this is enough to make Felscard competitive with Aldrachi for Havoc for damage. And then hopefully this note here, I think, is a good nod to the fact that Havoc in particular with Aldrachi, a very large portion of their damage came from hero talent tree, which is another thing that has been wildly all over the place in this beta cycle, has been what percent of your damage comes from your hero talent tree for each spec. So again, starting to try and tune that and get everything into a similar-ish range is good. Druid. They reverted some changes that came with the tank changes. Frenzied regen heals for 20% of your max health was 32. Great. This was one of the changes I was most negative on in that, if you go back and watch my tank reaction to the tank changes, I was most negative about the tone of their blue post, actually. And then I actually liked a lot of their specific changes, but I hated seeing Frenzied Regen get taken down to 20% from 32. So this one getting reverted is great. Renewal healing for 30% instead of the 20, like getting that reverted, I care less about, but that's also fine by me. That's also totally fine. This one also affects DPS players and non-tanks. But yeah, again, I'm fine to see this renewal change. That one is cool. The Frenzied Regen change, I think, is very, very good to bring that back to 32%. Hero talents. Druid of the Claw. Bestial Strength increases Ferocious Bite damage by 8%, was 5, and now increases Rampant Ferocity damage by 8%. Feral Ravage dealt to other enemies in front of you increased by 25%. Dreadful Wound damage 10%. So these are Feral Druid of the Claw changes here, not just all Feral changes. There's more Feral changes further down below. Illune's Chosen. Fix a typo in Lunar Insights Tooltip. Guardian, 70% reduced damage from Boundless Moon Knight. And Lunar Insight now increases Moonfire damage by 10%, was 20%, so nerfs to Lunar Bear. Wildstalker. Bloodseeker Vine's damage reduced by 10%, Bursting Growth damage increased by 30%, and Bond with Nature increases healing you receive by 4%, was 3%. This is cool. I think Bursting Growth is the one where you're supposed to, like, tab Bite, which is a cool little playstyle thing, I think. So I think that's what this one was. If I'm wrong, then oopsie. Feral. We are increasing Feral's damage overall, especially against multiple targets, and moving some of their damage out of Bite and into other sources like bleeds and builders. Rip damage 10%, Rampant Ferocity damage increased by up to 100% when players spend extra energy on Bite. Taste for Blood increases Bite damage by 12%, was 15, and additional 12 was 15 during Tiger's Fury. Apex Predator's chance to proc against multiple targets increased slightly. Shred Swipe, Brutal Slash Thrash, Lunar Inspiration, Moonfire, and Rake initial damage 30%. Berserk increases all damage by 15, was 10. Berserk Frenzy now causes enemies to bleed for 150% of all direct damage dealt by combo point generating abilities, was 135. So Berserk getting quite a bit more powerful. Again, note that these two changes are going to be multiplicative with each other. Primal Wrath direct damage increased by 20%, and Adaptive Swarm direct damage increased by 20%. So they're not really moving that much damage out of Ferocious Bite here. It's just Taste for Blood's amp of Ferocious Bite. But Rampant Ferocity is going to potentially make up for that. This doesn't even seem that... I guess they're just buffing its damage overall and not Bite, but putting it mostly into the builders and Berserk. Guardian, Frenzied Regen. Okay, so this change has been reverted. This is the Frenzied Regen change that's been reverted, I think. Dream of Cenarius now increases the healing of the affected regrowth by 130%, was 200. So that one is off-healing capable. I would say for Dream of Cenarius, just sort of like for for Word of Glory for Prot Pallies, it sucks that this is going to do less self-healing after this nerf, but it's good that it's going to do less healing to your group. I think that all of these sorts of any kind of healing that can go on you or other players as a tank, I think philosophically it would be really good if Blizzard went into like all of those. So like Dream of Cenarius, Word of Glory, Vivify off healing because you get instant Vivifies if you're playing Vivacious Vivification, if you're a Brewmaster, like those sorts of effects. And they were like, okay, we are going to make these things do double healing if they target you. I think that sort of change would be really good so that they could then make them do not oppressive amounts of off healing if you're using it on other people, but still do meaningful amounts of healing when applied to your much bigger tank health pool. So that is a change I would like to see. In general, I think this is probably still good, though, because you do often use this one for off healing. Fix an issue with the increase the amount of rage required to trigger after the wildfire. And Nerebar 4-piece has been updated. Arcane damage you deal is increased by 5%, and bleed increased by 8%, trying to make this a little bit more agnostic between Lunar Bear and Druid of the Claw, which is good. When the set first came out, I kind of assumed it was going to be a lot better for Lunar Bear just because Lunar Bear was doing so much damage at the time, and that is somewhat being nerfed, and also they're now trying to buff the bleed side of this because bleeds are a smaller portion of your damage, I guess, when you're a Druid of the Claw than arcane damage is when you're a Loon's Chosen. So, yep, seems fair. All right, Evoker. Scale Commander. Mass Disintegrate now changed from the Evoker instead of the target, and its range has been increased 25 yards, was 20. This is great. Sometimes you would find this counterintuitively not providing you with the Mass Disintegrate when you think it should. Like you target a mob, and there's another mob 10 yards away, and like it doesn't... You think you should be chaining onto it, but it doesn't. So this is definitely nice. Hopefully that fixes that. Dev, Animosity causes Empower spells to extend the duration of Dragon Rage by 5, was 4, up to a max of 20, was 16 seconds. So this was this got changed to have this maximum during this beta cycle, and was widely regarded by Devastation players as a really sad thing, because this was kind of the only skill thing in the dev rotation, was getting your Dragon Rage extensions and min-maxing that. This is definitely a buff. This is going to make Dragon Rage feel better. In fact, the fact that the first 2 extensions are going to give you 2 extra seconds is going to make it go from trivial to super trivial, even with low levels of haste, to then get to your second set of extensions, especially once you have the set bonus as well, that's giving you faster Eternity Surges, I think. So getting the full 20 seconds is going to be super duper easy. I'm still a little sad to see this go off of having a skill thing. I feel like it would have been really cool if they just made Animosity into a choice node between, say, Dragon Rage lasts 20 seconds longer, or Empower spells extend the duration by 5 seconds without a cap, and that way, like, there is one you could take if you just wanted the flat extension without having to worry about pressing Empower spells and lining it up properly, and, you know, having them both off CD right when you hit Dragon Rage and all that stuff, and lining it up with Lust and PI and things, which I do get PI being part of the problem here as well. But I am sad to see this go. I'm still sad to see the change in general. This will make dev, I guess, feel a little bit nicer because you're just going to be in your CDs for longer, but this doesn't help with the, you know, skill issue of people that want there to be some skilled gameplay in the spec. In fact, it makes it even a little bit worse because now it's going to be easier to hit those extensions, but honestly, it was easy enough anyways that I don't think anybody's really going to have a problem with that. And also, Titanic Wrath is now a 1 point node, was 2, so maybe that's plus 1 point. Cool. All right, up next is Hunter. We have some Dark Ranger changes. 100% damage on Black Arrow, 50% damage on Shadow Surge. Dark Hounds now auto attack as Shadow. Withering Fire now fires a 4th arrow, and they're slightly more staggered time-wise from each other. And Overshadow now gives you 20% increased damage, was 15 on affected abilities. Sentinel, just for marksmanship, they're nerfing Symphonic Arsenal damage. Again, good to see these spec-specific hero talent changes. Love that. Marksmanship, wind arrows now fire after you cast aim shot rather than during the cast. Many issues with wind arrows failing to fire or breaking have been resolved. Rapid fire's cooldown between procs of wind arrow has been reduced to 0.2 seconds, was 0.7. Survival is also getting small nerfs to Wildfire Bomb and Flanking Strike as well in this build. Mage. It is. I see. This week they're doing a bunch of mage changes. Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's good. This is uncommon. It's rare to see this many changes happening for mage. Usually you'd expect, you know, I guess it's just their turn. It's their turn. But next week it'll be somebody else's turn to get the entire, you know, a full Wikipedia article's worth of changes here. Okay. Frostfire Mage. Frostfire's been updated to use Fire Mage's Living Bomb behaviors and now benefits from talents that affect Living Bomb. But Excess Fire now applies Living Bomb at 75% effectiveness for Fire Mages only, which makes sense because they're going to be multiplying its damage with some other effects from their tree, potentially. Spellslinger. Embedded Splinter's maximum stat count reduced to 8 until Splinter Storm is learned. Okay, I think this is supposed to stop you from not wanting to talent Splinter Storm, which is something that you're currently, or at least last build, it was a DPS loss to talent Splinter Storm as Arcane. Controlled Instinct no longer has damage variance. It's now capped at 5 targets and no longer splashes. Volatile Magic now correctly damages the primary target, having its embedded splinters removed. It now deals 1 instance of damage that scales based on the number of stacks. This is just performance changes to make it, less numbers for the server to deal with. Frost Splinter damage increased by 100%. Embedded Frost 100%. Frost Splinter Storm 100%. And Splintering Orb's Arcane Orb now only grants 2 splinters per target hit, was 4. So buffing Spellslinger Frost, nerfing Spellslinger Arcane. Sun Fury. Burden of Power now increases the damage of Arcane Blast by 30%, was 15. Phoenix non-exceptional spell damage increased by 20%. Phoenix Greater Pyro increased by 30%. Phoenix Arcane Surge 100%. So buffs to Sun Fury, small buffs for Fire Sun Fury, bigger buffs for Arcane Sun Fury. Arcane. Barrage damage reduced by 65%. Damage increase per charge increased to 90, was 30%. Now, I think these changes, or similar, were listed in a previous build, but I don't think they correctly deployed in that build, so I think they're maybe relisting them now. I think this was maybe a 60 before, and now it's a 65. But yeah, this is a similar idea to something that happened in a previous build. Blast damage increased by 10%. Concentration now procs 3 times per minute, was 2. Arcane Echo now has a 0.2 second cooldown between procs, and its damage has been increased by 25%. So the big thing that they're trying to do here is they do not want you spamming Arcane Barrage. Whether they've succeeded at that, this is probably enough to do that, to make a Barrage spam playstyle not something that you do. Fire. Pyroblast damage increased by 5%. Phoenix Flames damage, 10%. Fireball damage, 20%. Flame Strike damage, 10%. Quick Flame Strike damage bonus increased to 25%. Flame Patch damage increased by 30%. Living Bomb damage increased by 100%. And this is a dev note. Living Bomb's frequency has been creating performance issues in high target scenarios. The following changes are targeted at reducing damage events while only marginally affecting throughput. We'll be keeping an eye on how these changes affect Fire Mage and will make adjustments as necessary. So they're buffing the damage Living Bomb does, but all talents that affect Lit Fuse's proc rate have been reduced by 50%. So it's going to half as often, doing twice as much damage. Because things guarantee Live a Bomb. Wow. Living Bomb. Because things that guaranteed Living Bomb gain a lot of power from these changes, we're adjusting them to compensate as well. So Explosivo's Living Bomb damage increase during combustion was reduced to 40%, was 50. Deep Impact CDR reduced to 10 seconds, was 15. Living Bomb is now target capped at 8 and no longer splashes. Living Bomb visual effects now have reduced visual fidelity in raid groups as well. So Living Bomb, yeah, a lot of adjustments for the performance side of things, trying to not affect its throughput too much. But then some general throughput buffs for Fire, which does make sense. The spec was underperforming on beta relative to Arcane, which is also, you know, Blizzard there can't only ever be one good mage spec. All 3 mage specs have to be good. That is a known rule. Speaking of which, here's some frost buffs. Iceland's damage increased by 10%, Glacial Spike 10%, Flurry 12%, Blizzard 50%, Frozen Orb 10%, Comet Storm 10%. Splintering Ray's Ray of Frost damage increased to 30%, was 25. Splitting Ice's Iceland's damage to nearby enemies 90%, was 80. And Cone of Cold's damage is increased by 100% as well. So frost buffs as well. This spec was looking quite bad in the most recent beta build before this, so this is fine. Again, Mage can't have any bad specs. That's not allowed. Monk, Brewmaster. Brewmaster's balance increases Monk's armor by 45%, was 50. An increase to the amount of damage staggered has been reduced to 5%, was 8%. So this was, when they nerfed all the tanks, they accidentally buffed Brewmaster by putting in this 8% increase to damage staggered and also a big increase to their magic damage stagger coefficient. They are now nerfing Brewmaster a little bit, which this will probably mostly just take that back to where it was. I expect the spec will still be good. I mean, losing armor for Monk is definitely going to hurt, but the 5% increase in stagger is still notable. Again, every point of stagger is increasingly valuable as you're getting closer and closer to the cap. So I think particularly still late in the expansion, they're still going to feel a lot better than they did in Dragonflight, as this 5% is going to be the difference between, 87% and 92%, which is a huge deal compared to the start of an expansion where maybe it's the difference between 75% and 80%, a less huge deal, but still big. But it's like twice as good, 3 times as good in the later part of the expansion to get extra flat stagger percent. Paladin. Shield of the Righteous increases your armor by 160% of your strength, was 150. Hero talents, Prot, Hammer of the Light, now costs 3 holy power, was 5 for Templar. Holy Shock, healing decreased by 8%, Word of Glory decreased by 13%, and Prot, Word of Glory healing increased by up to 300% based on your missing health, was 250. Bulwark of Order now shields you for 60% of your Avenger shield damage, was 50%. So, some small buffs here to Prot Pally, some nerfs to Holy Pally. Prot Pally was definitely the weakest tank in the most recent beta build. I like the Bulwark of Order buff. I don't particularly like shifting more power into Shield of the Righteous. I like the fact that they're buffing Paladin. I don't necessarily like this as one of the ways to do it. I do think that the Word of Glory buff here is definitely nice. This does, that thing I was talking about in the Dream of Scenaria section where it's like, I wish that these off-healing abilities that these tanks had were more powerful when used on yourself. Well, the Word of Glory healing based on your missing health is something that does apply when you heal yourself. I think there's a talent that makes it work on your group as well, although maybe they removed that after Season 1 of Dragonflight, because they did remove some talents that buffed Word of Glory after the Holy Paladin no healer groups incident. But yeah, this is a good way of doing this. This is a good way of making it so that Word of Glory, is stronger healing on you. I think just a flat increase on it to you as well would be good still. I suspect Prot Pally has gone from being the worst tank in the last beta build to still being the worst tank in this beta build. But that is a suspicion that we'll have to check with the actual how it feels on this build. Priest. Oracle. Resolved an issue causing Premonition of Solace to not benefit from Premonition of Piety and Benevolence. Premonition of Solace absorb value increased by 40%. Premonition of Piety now increases the healing done by 15% while active, was 10. Now redistributes 70% of overhealing, was 50%, to up to 4 nearby allies, was 3. And resolved an issue causing Premonition of Insight to not work with Rapture. Discipline Oracle. Preventive measures now increases the absorb of Powered Shield by 25%, was 15. Now increases the damage of Penance, Smite, and Holy Nova by 25%, was 15. Preemptive Care now increases the duration of atonement by 3 seconds, was 1. Assured Safety now applies 4 stacks of prayer mending, was 2. Holy is getting basically these same changes as well. I guess preventive measures now increasing healing of prayer mending by 25 was 15. Assured Safety now applies a powered shield at 100% effectiveness was 25. Preemptive Care now increases the duration of Renew by 6 seconds was 3, and now also applies the duration of Renews from Revitalizing Prayers and Light Ball. So really trying to buff Oracle Priest here. Discipline also has Rapture cooldown now starts when pressed, and it lasts up to 30 seconds. Okay. So you press Rapture, and now you don't have to click all your shield. Like, you don't have to get done with the Rapture soon to get its cooldown started, but you do have to do it within 30 seconds. Okay. Makes sense. This is probably, in almost all cases, this is probably going to be a buff. Rogue. Fatebound. Hand of Fate's Head's effect now grants 10% increased damage on its first flip, was 3%. I wonder if this increases the scaling of future flips as well. Trickster. Outlaw Trickster. Nimble Flurry now increases Blade Flurry damage by 20% while active, was 15%. And Subtlety. Nimble Flurry now flurries 50% of noted ability damage while active, was 40%. Okay, so a little bit of buffs to Trickster AoE. Assassination, all ability damage increased by 4%, auto attack 10%, Envenom 10%, Crimson Tempest 10%. So some medium buffs to Assassination. Outlaw, all ability 10%, auto attack 10%, Sinister Strike 10%, Pistol Shot 10%, Blade Flurry, initial damage 50%. Sleight of Hand, additional chance to roll the bones to grant multiple effects increased to 15% was 10, and Count the Odds also buffed to 15 was 10. And then Subtlety, auto attack 10%, eviscerate 10%, black powder 10%. So biggest buffs to Outlaw, then Subtlety, then Assassination. Subtlety was the one that was looking the best already. And don't be confused here as well. Like, obviously there's fewer patch notes for Subtlety here, but eviscerate and black powder are much of your dam. So this is definitely quite big still for Subtlety, even though it looks like a lot more is happening for Outlaw. Okay, Shaman. Stone Bulwark Totem now has a 3-minute cooldown, but its effect has been significantly increased. Cool. Hero talents. Farseer. Wow. Gosh, this is almost as many changes as Mage gets. That's cool. Hero talents. Farseer. Resolve an issue causing ancestors to not cast anything when the targeted version of Earthquake is cast, because you can now talent into a targeted or enemy location targeted Earthquake, which is really sweet. Lava Burst damage from Ancestors increased by 25%. Chain Lightning damage from Ancestors increased by 50%. Healing Surge healing from Ancestors increased by 60%. Ancestral Swiftness is now a 30-second CD, was 45. Heed My Call now increases the duration of Ancestors by 4 seconds, was 2. Ancient Fellowship now has a 20% chance to trigger, was 15%, and is now less random, which I assume means that it just has some bad luck protection built in. It's rather than just rolling this chance independently of how the last few chances have gone. Okay. Cool. Yeah, Farseer is really cool, really fun. Love it on Resto. I think that structurally it's going to be a lot weaker than Totemic because I think it's just going to apply your Ancestral Vigor to a lot fewer people than Totemic does, which seems like a really strong thing that Totemic Resto can do. But still, it's a really fun build, so this should be cool. I'd love to see it. Maybe something you could do at M+ now. Stormbringer. Stormcaller now increases the crit chance of your nature spells by 5%, was 10. Tempest secondary cleave damage lowered to 50%, was 70%. Unlimited power reduced from 3% per stack to 1% per stack. And arc discharge lowered to 2 chain lightnings, was 3. Enhancement's also getting another nerf here in addition to, so these are nerfs. Conductive Energy's Lightning Rod variant is now 10% of damage transfer, was 20%. Okay, so nerfs to Stormbringer. Totemic. Enhancement. Tremor now deals Flame Strike damage. Surging Totem's Tremor frequency is now affected by haste. Tremor damage reduced by 25%. 35% rather. Resto. Imbuement Mastery now increases the duration of Earth Living Weapon by 3, was 6. Chain Heals no longer consume, or Chain Heals from Lively Totems no longer consume Whirling Air, Nature Swiftness, Tidal Waves, or Tidebringer. Healing Surges cast while Whirling Air and Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem are active no longer consume Whirling Air. And healing spells cast while Whirling Air and Nature Swiftness is active no longer consume Whirling Air as well. So I guess a little bit of nerfs, also just some kind of changes to how this is going to play. This shouldn't change too much of the value you can get out of this, because you should still be able to consume these procs. But, yeah. Okay. Elemental. Thunderstrike Ward now has its own spell visual. Cool. An issue with Thunderstrike Ward dropping off has been fixed. Cool. Earthquake now triggers Storm Frenzy on cast only. An issue with Fusion of Elements buff activating from Ice Fury Override instead of the cast has been fixed. Enhancement, Fire and Ice now properly buffs Primwave. Nature's Fury now properly affects Primwave. Primwave baseline passive buff lowered to 250%, was 500%. Now properly scales with Enhancement, Shaman's Mastery, and Elemental Spirit's elemental damage buffs. Primwave getting this nerf here, I mean, it still has gotten a cooldown reduction in the previous beta build, so it's probably still and benefiting from these, but yeah, it's definitely a nerf there. Resto, Tidebringer is no longer consumed if Chain Heal is cast while Nature Swiftness or Ancestral Swiftness is active. Earth Living Weapons heal over time duration is now 6 seconds, was 12, and its healing has been increased by 75%. Okay, so actually this makes this Imbuement Mastery kind of balance out, right? 3 seconds here instead of 6, but it's on a thing that is not quite double as effective, but it's close, and its baseline duration is a lot shorter. Undulation can no longer trigger from additional healing waves from Primwave. Undulation now displays and highlights Healing Surge and Healing Wave when it triggers instead of being consumed immediately. Warlock. Hellcaller, Seeds of Their Demise has been modified to reduce lucky and unlucky streaks when granting Flashpoint or Tormented Crescendo. Zevrim's Resilience healing has been increased by 800%. Afflock. Soul Conduit now has a 5% chance of refunding a Soul Shard, was 10. I think this was a revert of a change that they made a few weeks ago. Fix an issue where Tormented Crescendo was not correctly checking if target had UA, Corruption, Wither, and Agony. Fix an issue where Call of the Week was not correctly increasing the damage of the first 4 targets damaged by Malefic Rapture. Demo, fix an issue where Impending Doom would not summon a Wild Imp when Doom expires. Destro, Rain of Fire, up. Channel Demon Fire, damage dealt to nearby enemies, up. 35 and 25% respectively for those two. Fix an issue where Power Overwhelming incorrectly gave 1% mastery instead of 0.5% per stack. Fix an issue where 3 stacks of Power Overwhelming were granted when using Rain of Fire while talented into Inferno. And Soul Conduit now has a 5% chance of refunding a Soul Shard, was 10%. Again, I think these are reverts of buffs from previous builds. Warrior, good! Impending Victory is having a revert on this Impending Victory change. So Impending Victory was nerfed in the tank changes as well, down to 20%, getting put back up to 30%. Cool. Yeah, I think those 20% is just such a weak number to have on like a button like Impending Victory or like Frenzied Regen, that you want to be able to press it and feel like you've saved yourself. And 20 is just a low number, even with a larger health pool. It's just such a low thing to see there. So very happy to see that. Items. Remove the Artisan's Acuity from one-time outdoor profession treasures. So crafters are still able to start with relatively the same amount of acuity to begin their crafting journey. 200 has been added to the starter reagent bags from the quest Crafting to Order in Dornagal. So basically you won't have to go around and get all of the profession treasures to get all of your acuity. I assume you'll still want to do this to get the knowledge for those professions, so probably not a huge change there, but yeah, that's still a good change. Some PvP stuff. We don't talk about those here. Rewards. Imperfect Ascendancy Serum now grants passive primary stat and haste. Active effect reduced by 50%. Raid rewards. Swarmlord's Authority now grants passive haste, was primary stat, but the Scarab damage and absorb values have been increased accordingly. Nice. This was a pretty cool tank trinket, so I think increasing the value of the Scarabs and reducing the stat that it's giving, that probably even makes it cooler. Probably makes it better. Sikran's Endless Arsenal's Surekian Brutality stands... Sikran's Endless Arsenal's Surekian Brutality. Dude, these 5 words, just in this order with the apostrophes on the first and third word, like, this just strikes me as, like, it's just weird that this is a correct start to the sentence. It is, but it's just, it reads so weird. Sikran's Endless Arsenal's Surekian Brutality stance bonus damage, procced by critical strikes, reduced by 50%, and can no longer crit. This is just such an unwieldy... Oh my goodness, this entire, like, clause here. This is an all-time Hall of Fame unwieldy sentence, but yeah, they nerfed that. Known issue. Some of the realms, the leveling realms, aren't accessible, and the max level realm may have delves inaccessible right now as well. Cool. Those are the main changes in this week's beta build. There is, however, one final change, which is we do have potentially a new login screen. So I think people were speculating about this when the old one with just the cracked box here was out, but maybe like every patch, this portal will, change to be looking at different parts of the, wherever we're going in each patch, that kind of thing. could be pretty cool. So, yeah, I like that. Somewhat reminiscent of the early days of WoW, right? Wrath of the Lich King, or sorry, before Wrath of the Lich King. So TBC and Classic were Dark Portal login screens, and this is now again us kind of looking through a portal. So that's somewhat nostalgic of back then. There haven't been ones I think that looked through the portal. Maybe WoD had one as well. Anyways, I think this is cool. This is a lot more interesting to look at than just that cracked box thing. So hopefully it's animated and has some cool stuff happening in it too. Anyways, that's it for this week's video. Hope you've enjoyed. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.